In this lesson, we're going to learn about how to use events and how to work with loading elements on the page before it's presented to our site visitors. So what we're going to show you today is how to use the onReady function and $W. So back to the code panel. We have a few things already written here in code, and we have our onReady function ready to go here. So our onReady function already comes with our pages. Even if we create a new page, it will show up. So let's just try that out, for example. Add a new page. And you see right here, onReady already comes ready for us to go. And this is just where we're going to write our code so that before it actually presents to the page, our elements and the functions we create are already ready to go, so we don't have to look for those resources elsewhere. Back to Velo for beginners. And we're gonna go and work with our onReady function here. So you see I already have some code for our animation and even some for an on-click for a button, but we'll go into detail of those in the next lesson. This time we're just gonna focus on creating a simple function to display the time for whoever's visiting the site. So what we'll do first, we wanna make sure that our page design is already ready to go before we start to add the functionality to the code panel. So we already have something set here for the current time, this one element called label. And we can either drag and drop this label in, or we could just copy and paste this label and change the ID. So I'm just gonna copy and paste this label element here. Copy, and we'll paste it right here onto the page, and we'll line it up. And I'm gonna change this text to display the time. So just so I can reference how it's going to look, I'm going to display the time like this. And we're going to rename this text from text 49 to time. And then we're going to copy this once again. And we're going to make another text element here for the message that we want to display. So on top of me designing this page, I also want to keep in mind what I want this interaction to be like. I want to have this time display, but then also I want a message to display depending on the minutes that it is. So if the minute number is even, I want a message to show up different than what a message would show up if the minute number was odd. So we'll go here and just label this again as well. So I'll just type in display message because we're going to be changing this programmatically. So we're having that dynamic mindset with us throughout creating this application. So we go display messages, and we'll change out this ID again, and we'll just change this to message. So there's no need to change any of the options for the default values. We'll just leave it as so. And what we'll do is actually, we'll take this outside of our onReady function to show you how functional programming actually works as well. So there's maybe instances where I create a function and I want to reuse it and invoke it somewhere else. So we're gonna take our function outside of this onReady function, and we're gonna invoke it later on. So I'll show you how that works and what I mean as we build it. So again, we wanted to make sure that our design was already ready to go before we started to implement some code, and we already have in mind what we want to display on the page. So we have our current time is, we have this one element here for our current time, and then we have another text element here labeled as message to display the message. So outside of our onReady function, and you can check with the scope here by going right next to this bracket, and you can see where the scope ends. So right underneath line 17, I'm just gonna go and space out and go to line 19, and we're gonna create a new function to show the current time. So it's a function, and we can name this function current time. Remember, you can use camel case here, just so we can easily read the function when we wanna invoke it. And notice that when we create this function, that it becomes idle. When it's idle like this, that means that this function hasn't been invoked yet. So let's invoke this function in our onReady function so we can respond to the event that happens. So in this case, our response is showing the current time of wherever our user is. So we're going to invoke this function by just simply putting the name of the function and also some parentheses next to it. So let's just go here inside of our onReady function, and we're going to type in current time, and autocorrect or autofill is already there and showing us. and we can invoke our function here, and current time. Another cool trick, we can just right click inside of our code panel and click format. And this is similar to some extensions that you might be familiar with for our experienced audience. If you're using VS Code or Atom, any of those, there's certain extensions in those IDEs to format code like Prettier and Beautify. This is similar and it's already built in. So let's drag up our IDE real quick. And we notice here, right here on line 20, our current time function is no longer idle. So that means that it's invoked somewhere. But there's currently no code inside the scope of this function, so nothing's gonna happen until we add it. So let's go here and start to create a constant variable for the current time, since we know it's never going to change because our current time is set in stone dynamically based on whenever the user visits our page. So let's create a variable here. So you go with const, and we'll call that now. And we'll equal now to new date. So now this date operator here is going to allow us to work with the date throughout our code, and we can get the current time, the millisecond, the minute, you name it. So now we have this const now is equal to the new date. We're going to be able to use now in order to get the current time and even make a function so that if the current minute is even or odd, we'll show a different message. So let's start out with time. So remember, I already ID'd this as time right here. And we're going to use our $W selector API, $W, and we're going to mark time. In time, we want to change that display text or this default text that we have here already. So we're going to do this programmatically. And the reason why we do this instead of just going into the text is because it's easier for me to create a function that I can change what the text looks like constantly with code without having to go back into the editor each time just to change the message that displays. So there could be an instance where I have an API that I'm connected to that's going to show me a different message all the time. And it's a hassle to go back and forth and work with static data when I can have something dynamic constantly feeding me something. And we're going to change the text using the text property, since it's a text or a string data type. So .text, and we're going to equal that to now, which is our current date. So it's getting everything down to the millisecond. And we're going to use get local to local. We're going to use toLocal time string. So this is going to allow us to get that current time. So we're just going to open up this array because we're going to place it there. And then we're also going to change the time style so we can put it in shorthand versions so we don't get everything down to the millisecond. Although that's great, we can have it, we don't want to display that much for our users. So do time style, and we're going to change that time style to short. Cool. So let's just go into preview mode and take a look at this preview. So we'll go here. You see how the current time just changed to 3:06, but this display message hasn't changed yet, and we want to change it based on the number that the minutes are on. So right now, 6 is an even number, and we want to be able to change that message if it comes up as an odd number. So let's go back to the editor. And what we're going to do is select the messages element here, $W, messages. Again, we'll use the text property as well. And we're going to equal that to now.getMinutes. So we can get the current minute. And we want to check if the minutes are divisible by 2. And if not, we'll display a different message. Because if we can find out if it's divisible by 2, we know that it's an even number. So we'll do here, we'll get our %, and we'll just type 2. And we'll strictly equal it to 0. Next, what we'll do, we're going to set a ternary operator. And this ternary operator is similar to if and else statements where we are working with a condition. So if that number is even, we want a certain message to display. So let's just type in this message here. So we have to have something in question. So we'll have this question mark, and we're going to put our quote of whatever we want the text to change to. So if we have this here, we'll say we are time to get even. Let's try that. And on the other side of this ternary operator, if the number isn't even and it's odd, we want to display a different message that says, we live in odd times. Cool. So now that that function is written, remember we can always right click within the code panel and format our code to make it look nicer. So you see how a few changes just happened. We'll go here to preview. And remember, we wanted our time and our message to change. Cool. So we'll go to preview mode. We'll open this up. We'll go down. And you see, it's 3:08. And the message that's displayed is time to get even. So if we go back to the editor, and even if we preview and we wait a little bit, it's going to change to we live in odd times when it turns to 3:09 p.m. So the time might have changed by now. Let's check it out. There we go. It's 3:09 p.m. And the message that's on the bottom is we live in odd times. So these are some ways to work with your onReady function. There's the possibilities are endless. There's so many things that you can do with your onReady function. You can even create some other functions outside the scope like I showed you and invoke them and nest them into your onReady function or into other functions you have throughout your website. So this lesson, we went over how to use our onReady function and how to use it purposefully. In our next lesson, we're going to show you how to use event handlers and actually connect them to different elements on the page, like buttons, text. You can hover, click. There's so many other interactions. The web is an interactive space, so everything is handled by some type of event, and you'll learn that in the next lesson.